Have you noticed this dark blue dot? On the day of Valentine's Day on February 14, 1990, the ground staff suddenly heard a sound. Traveler number 1, who is 6.4 billion kilometers away, sent an order to turn the camera. Then Traveler number 1 opened the camera and took a picture of this classic scene. This dark blue dot is the Earth we live on. It only takes 0.12 pixels of the whole photo. It can be said to be an extremely small existence. If it weren't for humans living on this dark blue dot, maybe it would never be noticed in the vast universe. Undoubtedly, Traveler number 1 is one of the greatest detectors in human history. However, this video is about his sister, Traveler No. 2. Compared with the great feat of Traveler number 1 flying away from the solar system, Traveler number 2 seems to have always been forgotten by people. After all, the halo of Traveler number 1 is too strong. But what you may not know is that the achievement of Traveler No. 2 is far greater than that of Traveler number 1. During the mission, he visited a large number of planets and satellites, and flew away from the solar system in 2018. It became the second space-based detector after Traveler No. 1. Therefore, it was once called the most valuable detector by scientists. As early as 1967, when scientists observed the orbit of planets in the solar system, they accidentally found that in 10 years, there would be a collection of planets that are more than 176 years old. That is, Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune, and Neptune will be arranged in a row. If the detector grasps the opportunity, it only needs to spend a small amount of fuel to correct the trajectory. The rest of the time can be used to accelerate the gravity of the planets. If nothing goes wrong, you can visit these 4 planets in 12 years. You should know that under normal conditions where there is enough fuel, it takes at least 30 years for the detector to complete this task. In this context, Traveler number 2 decided to use new technology to accelerate gravity, and added a lot of top-of-the-line technology at the time. The device that looks like a straw hat above is actually a 3.7 meter in distance bubble face antenna. There are also 2 side-by-side antennas next to it. These are all for collecting data in space. Not only that, scientists also installed advanced infrared light detectors, cosmic ray detectors, and other particle detectors, wide-angle cameras, narrow-angle cameras, and infrared light detectors, etc. The most important thing is that there are 2 nuclear batteries and 16 small liquid rocket launchers. These are all used to correct the trajectory. It is worth noting that they were originally part of the Sailor plan, divided into Sailor No. 11 and Sailor number 12. However, with the gradual completion of the construction, scientists believe that their design has far surpassed the detectors of the original Sailor plan. In addition, the mission is more special, and they feel that they deserve to have an independent new name. Considering that after the mission is over, they will move towards the space of the star system, so they named it Sailor number 1 and Sailor No. 2. On August 20, 1977, Sailor number 2 successfully launched into space at the Air Force Base in Canaveral Corner, but due to the negligence of the ground staff, they forgot to send an important start code to Sailor number 2. This will cause him to not be able to start the high-intensity antenna on the detector. Fortunately, the ground staff found it in time and sent the code again, so that Sailor number 2 successfully restarted and set off. The first stop of Sailor No. 2 is Jupiter. On July 9, 1979, he made a detour 570,000 kilometers above Jupiter. Not only did he clearly observe a complex storm that moves in the opposite direction like a big red star, but also found that Jupiter actually has an extremely dim and powdery ring. Although it is not as beautiful as the Saturn ring, this new discovery makes the ground staff excited. In addition, Sailor number 2 also observed several satellites of Jupiter up close. He found 9 volcanoes erupting above Jupiter. This is the first time for humans to discover volcanoes outside of the Earth. He also saw a cross-reference pattern speculating that there is a layer of ice covering the Earth. On August 25, 1981, Sailor number 2 passed close to the back of Jupiter, used a device to analyze the atmosphere of Jupiter, and measured the temperature and density of the atmosphere. He found that the temperature at the top of the atmosphere was as low as -203 degrees Celsius, while the temperature at the bottom of the atmosphere was -130 degrees Celsius, and found that the North Pole was colder. This speculated that Saturn would also change seasonally. However, after Sailor number 2 slightly touched Saturn, the camera was temporarily exhausted due to excessive use, and the camera platform on the detector was stuck. At that time, he did not know whether to continue to go to Jupiter. Fortunately, the ground staff successfully solved the problem and allowed him to continue his exploration. On January 24, 1986, 4 years later, Sailor No. 2 finally approached Jupiter. The closest distance was only 80,000 kilometers. At this distance, Sailor No. 2 first found 10 unidentified satellites, and then found that the unique atmosphere of Jupiter was caused by its 97.77 degrees self-rotating axis. Jupiter is the 3rd largest planet in the solar system. It is more than 2.8 billion kilometers away from the Sun, and has 13 relatively dim stars around it. Sailor number 2 found that the orbital cycle of Jupiter is 84 years. The self-rotating cycle is only 17 hours and 14 minutes, and this is also the first time that humans have accurately measured the orbital cycle of Jupiter. It can be said that the data collected by Sailor number 2 within 24 hours of reaching Jupiter is several times more than what humans have achieved since discovering Jupiter. It is worth noting that Sailor No. 2 is the only close-range exploration of Jupiter in human history, and there has been no new exploration plans since then. Finally, on August 25, 1989, sailor number 2 approached Jupiter, and this was the last star he could visit. So, the ground staff decided to train him to get close to Mars 1 and no longer care about the orbit. The reason why he is so fond of Mars may first be that astronomers think he was kidnapped by Mars 1, because Mars 1 is the only large satellite in the solar system that rotates in the opposite direction of Jupiter. And the satellites on the opposite orbit cannot form in the same area as Jupiter in the solar system, so it may come from Kepler. Scientists used computer simulations to speculate that Mars 1 and Mars 1 met at some point in the past. Then Mars 1 captured Mars 1 with its powerful gravity, causing its orbit to reverse, and on Mars 1, sailor number 2 discovered the unknown star ring of the King of the Sea and the big dark cluster similar to the big red cluster of Jupiter. But this big dark cluster disappeared when Hubble's telescope observed it later. Scientists analyzed that it may be an empty hole on the cloud, because after the International Astronomical Conference in 2006, Pluto was reduced to a dwarf star. So when sailor No. 2 visited the King of the Sea, all the stars in the solar system were at least visited by man-made spaceships once. In contrast, sailor number 1 only visited Jupiter and Saturn, and therefore sailor No. 2 was considered the most valuable probe by scientists. It had a very rich journey this time, not only successfully completed the exploration of 4 planets, but also started a new exploration mission like sailor number 1. In 2007, sailor No. 2 first sent back information about the edges of the solar system. This is very important for the origin of human research on the solar system. And in 2010, sailor No. 2 suddenly sent back some very strange signals. The ground staff could never crack these signals. The famous German UFO expert Hausdorff said boldly that sailor No. 2 had been kidnapped by aliens. The program was rewritten so humans couldn't crack it. But NASA thought it was just a problem with its program. And sailor number 2 also carried a metal record. It can be stored in space for 11 years. It not only contains questions in 60 different ethnic languages, 35 natural sound effects, and 27 ancient world-famous songs. On the other hand, it also recorded 115 photos of Earth civilization. If alien civilization captures sailor No. 2 and cracks the record above, then the existence of humans and the location of the Earth will be exposed. This may be a potential threat. In addition, the nuclear battery energy is running out. Most of the equipment carried by the fuselage has also been turned off to save electricity. It is expected that in 2025, sailor number 2 will not be able to start any single engine. And its current flying speed is 3.3 kilometers per year. So far, sailor number 2 has traveled more than 200 million kilometers away from us. The current technology of humans can no longer illuminate it. We can only let it move forward in space. If it can keep flying smoothly, it will be about 70,000 years later when it passes through half of the constellation Belen. About 300,000 years later, it will pass through the brightest star in the night sky. It is about 4.3 light years away from us. And the diameter of the Milky Way is 100,000 light years. We don't know if sailor No. 2 can finally fly out of the Milky Way, but it is like a time capsule placed in space by humans. As long as it exists, it means that humans once existed on a certain planet in the universe. And that's enough.